The afternoon Uncle Monty stopped by to see Alvin. He was on his way downtown to Miller Street, where, since he was 14 years old, he'd been working all night long at the market, arriving at around 5 and getting home only at 9 the next morning to eat his big meal and go to sleep for the day. That was the life lived by the richest member of our family. His two children fared better, Linda and Annette, who were a little older than Sandy and exhibited the painful shyness of girls who tiptoe around a tyrannical father, had lots of clothes and attended suburban Columbia High School in Maplewood, where there were more Jewish kids who had lots of clothes and whose fathers, like Monty, each owned a caddy for themselves and had a second car in the garage for the convenience of the wife and the grown children. Living with them all in the big Maplewood house was my grandmother, who also had a lot of clothes, all bought for her by her most successful son, and none of which she wore other than on the high holidays, and when Monty made her get dressed up to go out to eat with the family on Sundays. The restaurants weren't sufficiently kosher to meet her standards, so all she ever ordered was the a la carte prisoner's meal of bread and water, and then she never knew how to act in a restaurant anyway. Once, when she saw a busboy carrying a staggering load of dishes back to the kitchen, she'd gotten up to go over and help him. Uncle Monty cried, "Ma, no! Lazim tsuru! Let the boy be!" And when she slapped his hand away, had to be pulled back to the table by the sleeve of her ridiculously sequined dress. There was a black woman, known as the Girl, who came by bus from Newark to clean 2 days a week, and that didn't stop Grandma from going down on her knees when no one was around to scrub the kitchen and bathroom floors, or from doing her own wash on a washboard despite the presence in Monty's finished basement of a brand new $99 Bendix home laundry. My Aunt Tilly, Monty's wife, was endlessly complaining because her husband slept all day and was never home at night, though everyone else in the family considered that, far more than her own new Oldsmobile, to be her good luck. Alvin was lying in bed and still in pajamas at 4 in the afternoon on that January day when Monty first dropped by to see him, and to dare ask the question whose answer none of us exactly knew. "How the hell did you manage to lose a leg?" Since Alvin had been so uncompanionable when I got home from school, responding with a grunt of disgust to whatever I offered to cheer him up. I hardly expected our least lovable relative to elicit any response at all, but the intimidating presence of Uncle Monty, with the ever-present cigarette dangling from the corner of his mouth, was such that not even Alvin in those early days could tell him to shut up and go away. On that particular afternoon, Alvin couldn't begin to mimic the brash defiance that had enabled him to hop like a marvel across the Penn Station concourse upon arriving back home as an amputee. "France," Alvin hollowly replied to the big question. "Worst country in the world," Monty told him. And with no lack of certainty, as a 21-year-old in the summer of 1918, Monty had himself fought in France against the Germans in the Second Bloody Battle of the Marne, and then in the Argonne Forest when the Allies broke through on the Germans' western front, and so, of course, he knew everything about France. "I'm not asking you where," Monty said. "I'm asking you how." "How?" repeated Alvin. "Spit it out, kid. It'll do you good." He knew that, too. What would do Alvin good? "Where were you," he asked, "when you got hit? And don't tell me the wrong place. All your life you've been in the wrong place." We were waiting for the boat to get us out. Here he closed his eyes, as though hoping never to open them again, but instead of stopping right there, as I was praying for him to do, "Shot a German," he suddenly said. "And?" said Monty. "He was out there screaming for the rest of the night." So, go on. So he was screaming. So what?" So near dawn, before the boats due in, I crawled over to where he was, maybe 50 yards away. By then he was already dead, but I crawled around the top of him and shot him twice in the head. Then I spit on the son of a bitch, and in that second they threw the grenade. I got it in both legs. On one of my legs, the foot was twisted around, broken and twisted. The other they could fix. They operated and fixed it. They put a cast on it. They straightened it out, but the other was gone. I looked down and saw one foot backwards and one leg dangling. The left leg just about amputated already. There it was, and nothing like the heroic reality that I had so shallowly imagined. "Out in no man's land, all alone," Monty told him. Could be you were hit by one of your own. It's not light. It's half light. It's not. It's not yet light. It's half light. A guy hears gunfire. He panics. Bingo! He yanks the pin. As for that surmise, Alvin had nothing to say. Anyone else might have understood and relented, if only because of the perspiration beading Alvin's forehead and the droplets pooled in the hollow of his throat, and the fact that he still wouldn't open his eyes. But not my uncle. He understands and doesn't relent. And how come you didn't get left there after pulling that stunt? How come they didn't just leave you to die? There was mud everywhere, was Alvin's vacant reply. The ground was mud. All I remember is that there was mud. Who saved you, misfit? They took me. I must have been out of it. Came and took me. I'm trying to picture your brain, Alvin, and I can't. Spits. He spits. That's the story of how he loses a leg. Some things you don't know why you do them. It was I who was speaking. What did I know? But I was telling my uncle, you just do them, Uncle Monty. You can't not. You can't not, Philly, when you're a professional misfit, to Alvin he said. So now what? You're going to lay there, living off disability checks? You're going to live like a Sharpie off your luck? Or would you maybe consider supporting yourself like the rest of us dumb mortals do? There's a job at the market for you when you're out of bed. You start at the bottom, hosing down the floors and grating tomatoes. You start at the bottom with the buggy luggers and the schleppers. But there's a job there working for me, and a paycheck every week. Your pocket, half the take, at the Esso station. But I'll go with you anyway because you're still Jack's kid. And for my brother Jack, I'd do anything. I wouldn't be where I am without Jack. Jack taught me the produce business, and then he died, just like Steinheim wanted to teach you the building business. But nobody can teach you, misfit. Throws the keys in Steinheim's face. Too big for Abe Steinheim. Only Hitler's big enough for Alvin Roth. In the kitchen, in a drawer with the potholders and the oven thermometer, my mother kept a long, stiff needle and thread to truss up the Thanksgiving turkey after it was stuffed. It was the only instrument of torture aside from the ringer that I could think of that we owned, and I wanted to go and get it and use it to shut my uncle's mouth. At the bedroom door, before leaving for the market, Monty turned back to summarize. Bullies love to summarize. The redundant, upbraiding summary. Nothing to equal it outside the old-fashioned flogging. Your buddies risked everything to save you, went in and dragged you out under fire, didn't they? And for what? So you could spend the rest of your life shooting craps with Margulis? So you can play 7-card stud up at the schoolyard? So you can go back and pump gas and steal Simkowitz blind? You make every mistake in the book. Everything you do wrong. Even shooting Germans, you do wrong. Why is that? Why do you throw keys at people? Why do you spit? Someone who is already dead and you spit. Why? Because life wasn't handed to you on a silver platter like it was handed to the rest of the Roths? If it wasn't for Jack, Alvin, I wouldn't be standing here wasting my breath. There is nothing you have earned. Let's be clear about that. Nothing for 22 years. You have remained a disaster. I'm doing this for your father, Sonny, not for you. I'm doing it for your grandmother. Help the boy, she tells me, so I'm helping you. Once you figure out how you want to make your fortune, come around on your peg leg and we'll talk. Alvin didn't cry, didn't curse, didn't holler. Even after Monty was out the back door and into his car, and he could have unleashed his every evil thought, he was too far gone to roar that day, or even to crack. Only I did, after he refused to open his eyes and look at me when I begged him to. Only I cracked alone later in the one place in our house where I knew I could go to be apart from the living and all that they cannot not do. And that's the end of chapter 4, and we're going to pause until the beginning of November to get into our Halloween reading. If you're following this on the playlist, you probably won't notice that anything has happened, but if you're just a day-to-day listener to these, it'll be a little bit before we come back to the plot against America, but I will see you then, and happy Halloween.